Again, everybody, Patricia Windrow sitting at the Cable Easel with a program which is viewed 6 times a week at least. I have the schedule here in front of me, and it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and sometimes more than once on one day. So I am working on a scene which is the Shenandoah River, done with a home videotape. Just as an example that you can involve yourself in this kind of activity very adequately. I mentioned earlier in the first part of this, in the first half of this program, that it is not the greatest quality, but the camera didn't cost $10,000. So that's why I've brought it in to let you see how, in fact, it does work. And what's been done so far is to do the layout, of course, and then the color selections of how you make this remarkable mountain, which is the Blue Ridge Mountain, in front of us, the right color. That mountain is almost always blue, but it's different shades of blue. And so, and then the river, which of course is ever-changing and yet constant at the same time. If that sounds contradictory, it's only because it's ever-changing because of the light. The water always flows in the same direction. Sometimes it flows a little bit deeper than others, but for the most part, the river is constant, has been ever since the early inhabitants of this valley were here. And that goes back to more than likely way back in the, I mean, there are records that there were people here 2,000 years ago. Archaeological digs have made that absolutely clear. So we're dealing with a part of the world which is changed, and yet at the same time has remained in certain areas quite constant in its looks. The only difference but now seeing people come down the river in a canoe is the fact that the canoe today is made of aluminum and not dugout logs or birch bark. And for the most part, the river is flowing still at the same rate as it did then. And so if you are inclined at all to any kind of romantic notions about this country, you will find them right here, that there are in fact areas in America where you can recapture a good deal of what took place long before we got here. And this Shenandoah River and the Blue Ridge Mountains is one of those places. I'm working here on the blend between the shadows of the riverbank and the foliage that grows along the riverbank and the way the river behaves as it flows. There is, if you're observing it in the monitor as I am, there is a rather wonderful and mysterious large streak of very dark water. That has got something to do with the flow of the water at that particular point, and I'm going to see if I can just sort of pull it across here, show you how even the slightest introduction of something observed is vital to the composition. This diagonal streak here has obviously got something to do with what takes place on the bottom of this river, and I'm familiar with what takes place on the bottom of the river because I swim here. And there are great flat boulders that lie lie on the bottom of the river and that cause some of these surface disturbances here. And you can, in fact, if you know where they are, you can walk across the river on the heads of these great flat rocks that are actually huge, and they lie next to one another, and in the crevices of these rocks is all sorts of wonderful life. There are trout, catfish, little itty-bitty silvery things, and then there's a rather remarkable population of turtles, and they are water turtles, obviously, sweetwater turtles, and they live a life of total indolence, resting on the logs that fall by the edge of the water, and they are still wild enough that if you get anywhere near them, they vanish in a great plop into the water. But it's very gratifying to think that one can still find these corners of America with this much to offer. I find that when I paint here, I do the same thing that I do when I'm painting Long Island scenes. I think about other things that are not entirely visible, namely what it is that causes the areas in which I'm sitting to be what they are. And one of the things that makes me interested here is that the conditions of the environment here is what has and I mentioned this in the first program. If you didn't see it, I don't hesitate to repeat myself sometimes, just to get the point across that this river is benign and very placid and wonderful looking, but if you give it half a chance and the right weather conditions, it becomes a raging torrent, quite dangerous in places. And just last week, some people were lost canoeing down the river, and I'm afraid there was a casualty. But the reason for this, for the pristine quality of the shoreline of this river, is that you don't build anything anywhere near the river that is evident to be used as a permanent residence or a permanent structure of any kind. There are no great bulkheads built on the banks of this river. There are no docks, and certainly no little jetties that go out, because they would simply get washed away in virtually no time at all. Many times during the year, 17 feet above the water, the normal level of the river is not unusual, and that's rather an exciting thing to think about. We have gone down there, and the water has flooded the road, of course, and has gone. And the branch that you see sticking out over the river on the monitor is holding some flotsam from the flooding of the river the last time it flooded, and that's about 8 feet above the surface of the water. So you can tell that you don't fool around with this river. You observe it, and you give it a tremendous amount of margin. I'm interested in the different patterns down here, but I'm also learning a great deal about the similarity of landscape paintings no matter where you are. The first thing that you must do when you paint landscapes is to be there. Or, as I'm saying in this program, take your video camera. As long as I have some green on here, I'm going to use it up out of my brush and put it in the foreground here, getting ready to put some beautifully sunlit leaves. There's very little poison ivy out at this time of year, but it's all lying in wait for me, because I'm very, very unhappy with poison ivy, and it's all growing along the banks. But at the same time, along the banks of this river, guess what's growing? It's almost more romantic than one can possibly imagine. Violets. Violets are growing along the edge of this river. And bluebells, violets, bluebells, dandelions, and daisies are growing along the edge of this river. I would have taken a shot of them, but it was just a little too indistinct, and the camera is not the high-quality camera which would have been able to pick them up. But there are violets growing right down there by the water's edge. I'm putting in a background tone for what is going to take place behind these trees. I always want to tell you that to lay the foundation for an event that is going to take place in the foreground, you certainly would not start to paint around the tree trunks. So this is what I call preparation for the middle ground and foreground events that are going to take place. All of this thing that takes place up here has got to have some background in which to to paint as an overlay. My talking to you about overlay painting is taking place right now as we speak. A little bit deeper tones. I'm using some burnt sienna and some of the only green that I'm willing to squeeze out of a tube, sap green, and this is all down here so that the darkness of the trees and the foliage is what causes all this shadowy look down here. There is also something else that takes place in these mountains, and that is that the snows are particularly heavy, and they linger for a very long time. And it was only until a couple of weeks ago that these mountains did not have snow in the gullies. Of course, wherever the sun hits, the snow disappears rather quickly. And the orchards that grow, the pioneers that were here found that they could grow apple trees on hillsides, and which in fact you will see happening. They sort of the trees sort of climb down a hill towards the valley, and it's really a sort of a remarkable sight to see a mountain and then suddenly a great big hill full of pink apple blossoms. I'm trying to lure you to come down and visit Front Royal. If you do, I am there in attendance in my gallery. By appointment. It would be a good idea for an appointment. If anybody would care to call, the number is 703-636-8993, and if you if you don't have that written down somewhere, you can always call the station, and they will give you the number. Here are the dark, wonderful, mysterious places along the banks of the river, and these are to be attended to because this is the subject. This is the subject of the painting, the Shenandoah River. And the river, of course, is not just the water in it, but it's what happens on its banks. I'm going to now begin to work on those trees because, as usual, time flies by rather quickly. The trees are sycamores, and I'm going to put them on with a palette knife. They are pale, and they are some of them are straight growing. Some of them have to struggle for the light, and some of them bend over because of storms and wind and so on. But the application of this color as an overlay will show you that you can get a rather nice rough effect. See, mountains are smooth in the distance, and therefore you can put those on with a brush. But when you're dealing with something that has texture, like a tree, it is painterly. To apply it with a certain texture in the application of the paint. And observing is one thing, but also being conscious of the texture of your subject matter is what makes for the interest as opposed to a photograph, because in a photograph there is no texture. It is all of the same quality. It's all smooth and shiny, and it's printed on coated stock. And so the interest of paintings as opposed to photographs, I think, is pretty obvious, but I'm not sure that everybody is aware of the fact that it's because of the texture that is involved. People seem to like to see how it is that the application of a medium, such as paint, can give the illusion of whatever you're painting. Over here, there is a rather large tree with a lot of brilliance on one side of it, but there is, as any cylinder will, as you will know, that any cylinder, it has its shadow side. And I'll see if I can apply that with this palette knife, and if I can't, I'll simply revert to the brush, and then maybe smooth this out for the business that you need to give the texture also to a tree trunk. Let me see if I can just smooth this out a little bit. As it turns, it is going to be a little bit, there's a middle color as it turns, as the cylinder turns. I mentioned this once before, that all long elongated objects, anything from an arm to a cucumber to a tree, is nothing more than an elongated cylinder, which means that it has its light side and its dark side and its middle color. So, good. I'm getting a signal from the deep shadows of the studio here saying in 1 minute we're going to take a break. Well, that's fine, because I'll be able to then revise what I need on my palette, because there's virtually no interest in your seeing me squeeze colors out on the palette. let me just sort of improvise up here with the branches that are in darkness, and with the what I call this really scrumbled area of heavy growth. These are all pretty much sycamores. There are some ash on the bank of this river, as well as once in a while you will find some willows. But it's all very foresty, and it's all wonderfully decorative. And I'm using one of my favorite brushes, which I just pulled the price tag off. It was $5.95. You can't beat that. And it's a synthetic. Oh, here's a shadow running across the bark of this tree. Isn't that's what is intriguing to me? And that's why when you shadow, obviously from some sort of other thing, when you observe, you'll get a realism which you don't get if you're trying to memorize it. There's no way of being able to memorize this, and therefore, once again, I'm going to repeat that working from life not only is easier, but it also makes for a great deal more interest in the painting. Well, I'm going to break for just a second and clear my throat and be right back. Once again for the final push towards completing as much as possible of this composition of the Shenandoah River. I've been talking for such a very long time about going out with your own video camera, and this is the time for you to understand what I'm talking about. And the need to still photographs are okay. You go out and take a photograph and you go back and you use it, but it's not quite the same as when you see something which is in actual motion. And this river is in motion at this time, and it changes as the motion proceeds. So the use of the video camera is a nice tool, and that's why I took this opportunity to do it. There's some sort of nifty and wonderful roots that are sort of working their way into this river, and I'm not going to dwell entirely too much. I did take some close-up shots of it for you to be able to understand what is happening. But the roots are the roots are part of the anatomy of this entire place. They do reach down into the water to be able to get the water, and then they make some nice effects on the riverbank. All of this up here is very interpretive. What is happening also is that you can minimize the amount of branches, but you have to use that device of closing a picture in with a, let me see if there's, I'll get some reflections in there later, if there's time. Hanging out over this river are these very small but also sort of important branches for the composition. They are coming from these sycamore trees that are on the riverbank, but they serve the purpose of closing the composition in and giving you some feeling of depth. You know that these branches are in front of the mountain, and they have a nice little shape. They have to be subtle. They can be They can be gently done, but they have to be observed. And observing them means that you either work with your camcorder, or you go out there and set yourself up. I can tell you that if I had set myself up there a couple of days ago on this riverbank to paint, I would have had to have a year's supply of mosquito and fly repellent, because they were in force. And that's really not that takes a little of your concentration away if you have to be battling that. So actually the video camera is a good idea. You are at least protected from from battling the elements in the form of flies. The dog was very unhappy with the flies. That's my dog, by the way, running and jumping in and getting that stick. Here is the thing that one looks for, and let me see. It goes all the way down. It seems to be a rather long one, and it hangs right down here over the water. And let me see if I can pull that down like so. And there it is. It needs to have a little bit of light to it. It does, in fact, come down over the water, and there are some branches that leave it. And this is how high up the water came. It's full of some flotsam and jetsam that took place in that terrific storm that we had a few weeks ago. But the branches do behave that way. Now, somewhere along the line here, the foreground is important. But I just wanted to mention that while we were down there filming this, a canoe came by, and it was a lovely little sort of a bonus to the afternoon on the river. And it will tell you that these things happen, especially on weekends. When you go down there of a Saturday or a Sunday, the river is absolutely crammed full of canoeists. Not full. It isn't like what you would find at Jones Beach, but you would say that during the afternoon you might be able to see 10 or 15 canoes floating down the river at a very gentle pace. There are no motorboats on this river, never have been, and I believe they're not allowed. There is a certain patrol. You're not allowed. This is the North Fork of the Shenandoah. The South Fork is on the other side of the Massanutten, and why they didn't give it two names. The river has one name, but with the North Fork and the South Fork. This happens to be the South Fork. Along here, there's some nice reflections that are taking place, just sort of being picked up from somewhere. And the canoeists, well, as soon as maybe the tape will be able to come down with some of the canoeists, and if we can't, I'll simply put it in, and I'll bring this painting in sometime and show you the canoeists. But they did float by and paddle by as we were there. They are. I believe that you will see, and that you have to work rather quickly and try and get that form in a hurry. That is a sort of a non-color canoe, and it's right in here somewhere. Let me see if I can get over. Well, let me get the size. The size is important to be able to tell you, give some feeling of scale, and the figures have to be just sort of interpreted. And I don't intend to make this a portrait of these people floating down this river, but one of them has a red shirt on, so we'll give that to him right now. And the other one is in white and has a hat on. Let me see. Oh, this is what makes it great fun. Here's the guy in white here, and he's pink. He did not. He was in white. Anyway, the business of putting these on, they must remember that the reflections are here's his arm up holding the paddle, and see if I can get the paddle in. But anyway, the reflections are the things that are just so wonderful as they're going down. And then the other guy had a red reflection. This one. Okay, let's see. And then I'm going to just sort of try to soften it a little bit with the finger. But you can sort of get the idea that with just a very simple interpretation, he had a white hat on. Let me see if I can get a little funny white hat on this guy. He had well, sort of. There we go. It's a question of interpretation as you work this. I'm trying to fake this because it's not easy to do. The boat had some reflections as well. There they are. Okay. Anyway, with more time, we would be able to make this much more plausible. This is not a canoe. This is a little fishing boat. So much for my talking about canoes. But the other canoes that take place down there are orange, and that's rather stunning when you have this blue river and the orange canoes coming down. Here are the weeds in the foreground to be done in a very interpretive way, because there are all sorts of different kinds of weeds. They are, some of them are lethal and some of them are not, and they all make part of the composition in the foreground. the need to work quickly, of course, is upon me at all times here. And when you're out there, if you are in fact working out there, you will, I guarantee, work very fast because of the bugs. The bugs aren't always there. They come, it's very erratic. I've never been able to figure out exactly why the bugs come at certain times. Here at the beach, we know that when it's twilight or it's getting towards the end of the day, the mosquitoes and the no-see-ums come out. But on the river, sometimes they come at different times, which I have not yet been able to figure out when. Here's the dark part of these weeds, the foreground now being established as closing the painting once and for all. As soon as you bring something to stop a very large plane of color, as soon as that gets stopped, that means that the painting has now come to a psychological end. There is a disturbance in the water here. It's probably one of those rocks that is surfacing because the river has either gone down or it's stuck somewhere. But that dark object here in the river foreground here is what makes it really interesting, because following that dark object is a line of the flow of the river, and I think that you'll agree that that gives a certain wonderful interest. This thing is stuck here, and it is making the flow of the river. Oops, too harsh. You have to soften that. But the flow of the river is what gives the painting some movement. And even though it's a static scene, you have to try to introduce some kind of movement, and that is done with the surface of the water. Well, I hope that this was helpful to you. I think it was rather interesting for me to be able to come and talk about my own video camera. I do not have an expensive camera, and it's obvious that you don't really need to have one. The quality, of course, of this scene is not the best, but it has given me enough information, and would give you enough information to be able to do a nice study of an area that you otherwise would not have the time, possibly, to linger for 4 to 5 hours on the edge of a river, but you would certainly be able to shoot 20 minutes or so with your own camera and get enough information to be able to do just what I was pointing out here today. I would like to be able to do this again, either that or to get the professional camera and a crew of 1 or 2 or whatever to come down and work up another one of these series with possibly some what I talk about, these the orange blossoms and the apple blossoms. This is a part of the country which just about everybody ought to try to really get to be familiar with. It's okay to go jazzing off to Florida and to lie on the beach for 4 or 5 days, but you certainly ought to investigate some of these more uninhabited regions in which you will find lovely accommodations, charming, gentle people who are glad to see you, and where the pace is somewhat slower than you would find wherever you happen to be. So not intending this to be a commercial for coming down to Virginia, but I think that you would probably find yourself surprised at some of the wonderful things that take place down there. Visually, it is without comparison, if you like mountain scenes, and the waters are, of course, quite wonderful. I hope that you got something out of this. I hope it was as entertaining for you as it was for me to do. And as we close, I'm going to run a streak of brilliantly lit reflections on the surface of this water and see if maybe one final stroke across the surface will tell you that this painting is finished. Thanks for watching. The Shenandoah River is completed in a short space of time. Tune in again sometime. Bye-bye.